So let's start by looking at just the foundation of this commandment, okay? And so to do that, we need to go back to the very beginning, to Genesis chapter 2, verses 2 and 3, which say this: "And on the seventh day God finished his work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work that he had done. So God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it God rested from all the work that he had done in creation." Now, let's just pause, pun intended, let's just pause here for a moment. And I have a question, I guess, for all of us here. The question is this: does God need to rest? I'll put it this way: does the creator of the universe, is he somehow tired after 6 days of work? Isaiah chapter 40, verse 28 says this: "Have you not known, have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He does not faint or grow weary. His understanding is unsearchable." So the answer to does God need rest is no, of course not, right? God, in his infinite power, who does not faint or grow weary, doesn't require rest like we do. He doesn't rest because he's exhausted from 6 days of work, and so he's deciding, okay, I'm taking the seventh day off. It's not what he's doing. Instead, God rests to set a pattern for all of creation. See, he ceases his work not out of necessity, but because his creative work is complete. As you've heard, God didn't create the universe because he was bored or lonely or needed something to fill some sort of void. He is fully sufficient and he is fully complete in and of himself. His creative power, rather, it overflowed into all that we see and know, the galaxies, the ecosystems, and even the invisible constructs like time itself. So God's rest on the seventh day, therefore, it's not a rest out of exhaustion, but of completion and satisfaction in his creation. In fact, the verb that's used for rest here in the Hebrew is Shabbat, and it carries this meaning of ceasing activity and taking a stable, secure position. So God, he wasn't stepping out from his creation. He wasn't stepping away from his creation out of fatigue, but he was rather settling into his role as the sovereign ruler of the completed creation. Just as Jesus said, "It is finished" on the cross in John 19, verse 30. That signified the completion of his work of redemption. So God's rest on the seventh day of creation, it's a declaration, rather, of completion. And so this idea of a day of rest, it was revolutionary in the ancient Near East. Nahum Sarna, in his commentary on Exodus, I think it's on page 111, he discusses how the cultures that are surrounding Israel, in those cultures, there was just no concept for a weekly day of rest. For example, Egyptian and Babylonian societies, they worked continuously without a designated rest day in their schedules. See, life was rather for them this constant cycle of work that was often driven by the rhythms and the nature of the demands of survival. But here, right at the beginning of the Bible, back in Genesis chapter 2, we see God establishing a different pattern. John H. Walton, in his commentary on Genesis, in his book of the Lost World of Genesis 1, he says this, and I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but he says basically that in the ancient Near Eastern mindset, rest was associated with temple building. So when the gods rested, it was in the temple that had been built for them. So when God rests on the seventh day, it's as if he's taking up residence in rather the temple of creation that he's just created. So he's declaring his rule and his authority over creation with this command. But God doesn't just rest himself, rather he builds it into the very fabric of the universe itself. And then, in the fourth commandment, he commands his people to follow his pattern. And now let's think about what this meant for the Israelites. Okay, so remember, they had just come out of slavery in Egypt. We've talked about this the last few weeks, but they had just come out of slavery in Egypt. And so for generations, they had been living under a system where they were forced to work constantly, where their value was measured solely by their productivity. And now God comes to them and says, no. That's not how I designed life to be lived. I want you to work, sure, yes, but I also want you to rest. See, this command, it would have been both liberating and challenging for them. See, liberating in the sense because it affirmed their dignity as human beings that were made in God's image, right? Not just cogs in an ever-productive machine, but But so that was liberating for them. But it was challenging too, because it required of them this radical reorientation of their understanding of things like time and work and their relationship with God. So the Sabbath, you see, it isn't just about physical rest, although yes, that is certainly part of it, but it's about stopping our normal activities to focus on spiritual renewal. It's a day set apart. It's a day to remember who God is and who we are in relation to Him. It's a pause in our regular rhythms of life to rather realign ourselves with God's rhythm. And this is why the command begins with the word remember. The Hebrew word that's used here is zakor, and it carries this sense of marking something, of keeping it in mind. And so God's basically saying here, He's saying, don't forget this. Don't let the busyness of life crowd out this essential rhythm that I've built into creation. I want you to notice the language that's used here. He says this, keep it holy. And the Hebrew word for holy that's used here is kadosh, and it means set apart, to make distinct or other. And so God is calling His people to make this day different, to set it apart from the other 6 days of the week. This idea of a holy day, a day set apart for God, that would have been for the Israelites just a powerful reminder of their identity as God's chosen people. See, in a world where time was often seen as cyclical, right? Where the days, they almost just blended into each other in this endless round work of survival. God gives His people a different concept of time. He gives them a linear concept of time with a clear rhythm of work and rest, all oriented towards Him.